Welcome to From Stardust to Us, in-depth conversations with thought leaders, artists, and spiritual activists, navigating the challenges of our times with integrity, joy, and purpose. I'm Bernice Marie Daly.
And I'm Linnell Hayden. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate our listeners. You can find us on YouTube, Buzzsprout, or any place where podcasts are found. If you enjoy our conversation, please help us reach more people by subscribing, liking, and commenting. So let's get into this week's conversation.
We are delighted today to be in conversation with John Roedel, and I want to say a few words other than hello and welcome. A little bit about you for our audience, and then we'll jump into a conversation. So John is a comic, husband, father of 3 boys, I believe in Wyoming at the moment as well. And a few years back, if I understand it correctly, you began a conversation on Facebook, I think stirred by some faith questionings, and you decided to write about it on Facebook, and lo and behold, 2 things happened. Other people were interested, which turned out to be thousands of people interested, and perhaps the biggest thing was that when you wrote to God asking questions, it seemed that God was writing back. And so we have this book called Hey God, Hey John, What Happens When God Writes Back? I would say there's 4 parts to this book, which are all telling in the process. Act 1 is Hey God, remember me. I can relate to that. You know, part 2, Hey God, this is getting weird. Hey God, I can't do this alone. And Hey God, I surrender. So we're delighted to be sharing this and your other writings, which we've also enjoyed. And I believe we want to begin with some questions that Linnell may have.
You bet. Thank you. That was a wonderful introduction.
Well, all true, all true.
Hi, John. So I read your book, Fitting In is for Sardines, and I loved it. It's just a beautiful, open-hearted, searing look into your soul about self-love and the expression of your true self. And I think that's something that most people, I'll speak for myself, I have a problem doing. We're in this culture, we have our cultural constraints, we have our family constraints, and now we have social media where we're all presenting this facade, which takes an enormous amount of energy to keep this facade up. But given what Bernice said in your introduction, you have found such great success and a large following being authentic. So there's a thirst for authenticity out there. People are missing that. They're looking for that. Maybe they don't even know they're hungry for it until they see it. And sometimes it does take a breaking down of the ego, some crisis of some sort, physical, emotional, spiritual. So I guess my first question to you, I'm very curious about is how, given your journey and what, I've read about it, and you can share what you feel comfortable sharing, but now that you're on the other side of your dark night of the soul, your crisis, and you are expressing your true authentic self, how have you changed internally? Maybe not just externally, but your interior self from the old John to the now John.
That's a really awesome question. And I would have to take like a drone level view of that to offer some of that, how you prefaced all that with some self-kindness and some self-love, because oftentimes, even though I've written about these things about how we need to be kinder to ourselves and give ourselves as much grace as we give other people in the world, and we usually give ourselves the last portion of any of those things. At the end of the day, we might give ourselves a spoonful of forgiveness or grace or understanding where we're giving it to everyone else. Is sometimes I still struggle with this idea that, oh, I'm a different person or I've changed. But because sometimes I have those days where I'm still stuck in the mud and I'm like, oh man, I am exactly the same person as I was 4 or 5 years ago. Why haven't these lessons sunk in. But the truth is, that's just when I'm being unkind. Yes, it's been a character arc for me that really begins with the idea that once I stopped worrying about what people thought about me, and I started showing who I was in real time to the world, it was almost a stripping down of the ego. It was the leaves falling off the tree, and in doing that, I fell in love with myself again.
Mm.
And I'm able to now, when I have these moments where I'm back in the dark night, where I think, oh, I've gotten past all my troubles, they can come back like a thunderstorm out of nowhere on the horizon. All of a sudden, they're just there. Or I feel stuck in the mud again. But now I know that the way through that is by having these conversations with myself. And when I was writing those pieces in Hey God, Hey John, I was doing that as a way of kind of poking fun at self-help and all these easy answer things that people would send me wonderful Bible verses, just like follow this and you'll feel better. And I wasn't feeling better. And so I needed to have these real conversations with myself and quote God, end quote, to get to know who I was, because I didn't really know who I was until I started writing.
Wow, I have so many follow-up questions. Let me just get a quick one in before I hand the baton over to Bernice. It's a really hard thing to do, though, isn't it? To let the ego take a back seat and to just live from your soul, I guess, is how I'm wording it. I'm not putting words in your mouth. So what was the biggest maybe fear you had about doing that didn't come true? That was just, you
Oh,
know.
that's a great question. And maybe it did come true. And maybe the fear is the people, because I live in a small town, and I live in Wyoming. I live in Cheyenne, which is 50,000 people-ish. We're the biggest town in all of Wyoming. And I realize that's like a city block in like New York, but we like 50,000 people live in my town of an entire state of 500,000 people. It's a giant, huge state. We're all spread apart. So I live in a town. My family moved here in the 1800s. I am a remnant of my great-great-grandfather moving here. So everybody knows everybody. And there are no secrets. And I was known long before I started writing and sharing it with the world as just someone who made people laugh. I did improv comedy. I performed on stage. I like to make people laugh. That was how I felt connected to my purpose. And the idea is like, well, if I start sharing these other writings and these other pieces with the world to show another side of me, people won't like me very much anymore. Because no one likes it when all of a sudden somebody changes. When somebody changes, they're like, oh, they must be in crisis. Oh, they must be having a midlife breakdown. Or, all these things that we put on people. And I thought, oh my gosh, all these neighbors and people that I've known my whole life are going to think less of me. And I think the truth is maybe a lot of them do. I have my relationship with people have changed in my nearby community because I'm no longer the person that this character of a person they thought I was.
Mm.
And so a lot of what I was worried about is like, is this going to affect my relationship with people? And it did, but it ended up being just such a wonderful, freeing thing. Because now when I go around town, I don't longer have to feel like, oh, I need to impress somebody by making them laugh, or I need to be on stage. I need to be the quickest, wittiest person there because that's what people think of me. I've shown people just another side of who I am. And for me, it's so freeing. And the people who left and don't want to associate with me because I'm talking about mental health, or I'm talking about faith crisis, and I'm talking about the mystery of everything, and that makes some people uncomfortable, and they've kind of walked themselves to the door on their own. And in a lot of ways, I don't feel this extra pressure to carry any of that on with myself. That's such a wonderful question, and I've never thought of it until just now. But that was a fear I had when I first started writing this way and putting it on Facebook. It's like, well, what are people going to think of me? And at the end of the day, I learned it's really none of my business.
And it's out
That's
of your
great.
control, so.
Right. Yeah, I can't control it. Perception.
Yeah.
I mean, you wonderfully framed everything at the beginning, talking about social media and this pressure we have to be our own PR agents and to have, oh my gosh, the tie needs to be perfect and the food I'm taking a picture of needs to look like Tom Colicchio and the Top chefs put it together, and everything needs to be perfect. And we are all these PR agencies for ourselves, and there cannot be one imperfection or blemish, or else we better filter it or get a face tuner or whatever else like that. And once I stopped worrying about that, and that was one of the benefits of that dark night I was in when all the leaves fell off the branch. The tree doesn't really care about anything else other than surviving. It doesn't care about what anyone thinks about it. It cares about conserving energy so it can bloom again. And that experience is how it happened for me. I came back in my springtime without worrying about how the blooms looked or how the branches looked. I just knew, man, these are real now. These are authentic.
We are also of the view you were expressing earlier. We're not here to have a perfect conversation. We're here to have a real conversation with real people, and we just love this. So my comment really had to do with some of the topics you talked about and how authentic your own presence is, but also you talk about stuff that so many of us have to talk about, parenting, lack of faith, um, the grief, how much grief and anxiety in our lives, um, depression, how to be, how to raise a child with autism, these things that you revealed that we also, we connect. We can connect on those things. So your authenticity connects with my authenticity, with all of our authenticity, which is why thousands of people responded to you on Facebook. So my comment is that at a couple of times you said to God, look, I have this problem and that problem and whatever and whatever. Why don't you fix it? There's this, hey God, you're God after all, why don't you just fix this? And I was wondering, because I am personally very fascinated with how significant suffering is in our life experience. And it's so easy to sort of say, well, God should be fixing this. So I really would love to hear some of your thoughts about that.
That's again, a wonderful question. I think that was the impetus of my faith crisis at the beginning. Was I had, a born and raised Catholic, very Catholic family, never missed Sunday Mass, went to Catholic school, met my wife in a Catholic school in junior high, raised our children Catholic. I worked early on in my life. I worked as a youth director in a Catholic church. It was all part of my identity. And then that's when life was kind of on this easy setting, when everything was, set for easy, difficulty settings were easy. And then the older I got, the more difficult life seemed to get and the more complicated things got. And a lot of these things that were so easy for me started to become so tricky and started to become without any easy bake answers that I could just pull out of my easy bake oven and, oh, there's the answer. Great. And nothing was, and all the stuff I'd learned in Sunday school and things like that, I was bringing I thought I deposited all this good faith into the Catholicism well, that when the poop hit the fan and I went to it, I could pull things out and it's like, oh, I've put all these deposits in, so I'll be able to withdraw all this faith and blessing and hope and help later in my life. And, that it didn't work out like that. And in my 30s, when life really started, the difficulty level got turned up to expert. All these things that I thought would be there for me, this well that I went to, there wasn't a lot of water coming out of it, that I thought I had filled with water, and there wasn't a lot coming out. It had all kind of seeped into the ground and gone away. And so why can't the suffering be taken from me? Why must I go through this? And a lot of it was internal, of my own mental health and the feelings of shame that go along with that, and the feeling of being afraid to ask for help. I mean, we have these male, scripts were given to us that you can't ask for help. You always have to be strong. If you cry, it's a sign of weakness. And I live in cowboy country here in Wyoming, and that's even doubled here, that effect. And it's this idea. So I was trapped inside of myself, and then external things started coming from the outside. So it was both happening internally and externally. And I was so angry at God And I was so angry. I felt like, oh my gosh, all this spirituality that I thought I was, so in tune with, nothing is working for me. None of these really easy answers of here's a great little Bible saying that will make you feel better. And none of it worked for me. And I was so angry. And it led to this faith crisis of like, well, if God's not solving my problems, then what was I doing all this work to begin with? Why did I invest in all of this religion and faith? And then as time came, and now clearly on the other side of most of that terror is this idea that if that was all taken from me, if my suffering and my pain was just magically wiped away with a blink of a divine eye or a magic wish, then this whole experience would be so boring. And my relationships with people wouldn't be as tight as they are now, because a lot of the times when I couldn't fall onto anything or my prayer life was suffering and I couldn't find those external things that I wanted to grace me with, it was people that pulled me from that. Because a lot of times it was only towards my wife or my close friends that I could go to and be vulnerable with them. And without that experience, I wouldn't have learned how to be vulnerable. I wouldn't have gone to Facebook to talk about my suffering had God, shown up as a dove on my shoulder and a unicorn in my front lawn and given me these great divine answers. I would have been like, great, thank you very much. But it was when I took it to the community, when I took it to other people to say, this is what's going on. I like to think God, or however I'm going to define God now, revealed itself to me through the words of other people. And when I share my story with people on Facebook, just parts of it, little bits of my story at a time, it's amazing. In the comments section, people will start typing their parts of their story and their perspective and what they've seen and experienced and suffered through and celebrated through. And it's through those experiences I feel like I'm getting answers to my questions that I've been asking for years, wanting to have some divine moment where that was probably, it's happening with the relationships and the people around us. And a story without any terrible moments, any movie has a moment of doubt and crisis. Any good story has a moment of doubt and crisis, because it's what we learn from those. We learn about how strong we are. We learn about the power of community, the power of asking for help, the power of, miraculous, fortunate events. And we learn so much from the moments where things don't get sorted out, where we do crash and burn.
Right.
And without those moments, man, how boring would our stories be?
Absolutely. And thank you. Thank you, John. I'm looking at a couple of the my favorite poem titles that I enjoyed in my Hey God, Hey John book, and also looking at topics like love is unstoppable, um, be the change, cruelty,
Yeah.
afraid of the light, where's my mind, uh, all totally relatable to our common human experience. And so I just want to really affirm what a gift you've given us all. What a gift you've really given us all. I'm really, really, really grateful. There is one
Oh,
particular,
thank
I'm
you.
sorry, go
No,
ahead.
that's wonderful. Thank you. That's very kind.
Thank you. This is kind, it's also true. Thank you. Thank you. There's one little snippet of a poem, and I am being coming from a Catholic tradition. You will appreciate the doubting Thomas piece of me, who I've had 1,000 years of Catholic education myself. So we share that. This conversation you're having with God, that I just like to read this little part. So that you or me or whoever is speaking, and then God is the answer. So you're saying to God, I don't think you're real. Are you sure about that? No, I'm right here. But you're so unseen. That's because you're so unlooking. I just loved it.
Yeah.
I just loved it. So, um, yeah, any comments about that or any
Yeah, it's
particular?
the
Yeah,
the idea of my faith crisis was that I needed to be more desperate in my relationship with spirituality and the divine.
Mm,
Before it had all been, here's a list of things. If you do, you'll be a good boy and things will work out for you. And then as I got older, that didn't quite work out for me. And it became like, well, I was going to the same well. I was going to the same things that maybe worked for me when I was 16 or 17. But now that I was 40, man, this isn't working for me anymore. So I didn't look anymore. And I stopped just being like, well, okay, that garden is dead. Well, there's 1,000 other gardens out there. And once I learned that there was so many other ways to look for and experience God and to find faith in the unseen, once I decided it's not just because I was born and raised Catholic, which is still part of my tradition and still part of my family's tradition, but I was able to say, but I can look in other places. I can look in poetry. I can
mm,
look in I can look in nature, which I wasn't doing before because I was taught you experience God purely in the sacraments in this church right here, community, and as long as you're around Catholics. And once I had to start searching in other places,
right,
God
right.
became a much more endless and infinite experience than I had before. It was
Wonderful.
like it's like thinking that the Milky Way or our solar system was the only thing, and there were these 7 planets, and that's it, and there we go. But no, beyond that, there's this infinity of possibility and beauty out there. That doesn't discredit this little place I'm in now. It's amazing. All these planets that surround us are gorgeous and beautiful and miracles. But my goodness, there's so much else out there as well that you at least need to acknowledge and look towards. And that's kind of
Mm,
how I look at it. Is I'm
wonderful.
in the solar system. I'm still Catholic. I'm still experiencing Catholicism, but my mind and heart are also looks towards other places as well. And once I was starting to look in other places, I started seeing the divine and God in a million places that I didn't see it before.
Wonderful. Oh, wonderful. What a witness. What a witness.
Thank you.
What a witness. Thank you. Thank you. I know
Well,
Linnell is dying to speak.
I only have about 10 or 20 more questions. Yeah, well, the title of our podcast, is Cosmic
Yep.
Entanglement. We definitely, resonate with the divine in everyone and everything. But when you were talking about it, I was kind of laughing to myself when you were talking about how boring life would be if everything just kind of worked out and we got whatever we wanted and every wish came true. Reminded me of an old television show called The Twilight Zone, and this
Mhm.
man, this he I forget what happened in the beginning, but he everything worked out for him. He won every bet. He got the girl, everything, and then he became more and more and more and more miserable, and he realized he was actually in hell. And so I think that going back to we need these times, unfortunately, of suffering and a crushing in order for the diamond within us to shine, really. And it's sounds like, because you do talk about we are cosmic divine beings, in your poetry. You use the word cosmic, which is kind of right up our alley. And it sounds like you have broadened or deepened your faith and changed in that way. Um, I guess I don't really have a question. I just wanted to delve a little deeper in that. And
Yeah.
coming from such a organized religion, because I don't. I grew up, we kind of went to community church and that was it. And so I sort of see the divinity in everything naturally. That's just how I grew
Yeah.
up. So how has that deepened your Catholic faith, or has it?
Yeah. I don't know that it has deepened my it has deepened my faith in that I believe this is what I've learned, and this whole experience of when I started sharing these things, I likened myself to a person who was a hermit writing in a small cabin in a vast kind of remote part of the woods of Wyoming, I'm not surrounded by a ton of diversity. I'm not surrounded by a ton of people who think other things or have wild ideas or anything like that. It's a pretty set community of, Christians, and that's about it. And that's why I was not exposed to other beliefs and other things like that. What this experience has done for me has shown me that God is a wonderful improviser. And where I was for my entire life, I was believing in the idea that everything that God has created is predestined, and my life is already written, and God knew me before I was born, and at the end of my life, that story is already complete. It's not going to surprise God anywhere, because God already knew everything about me before I was born. And the more I've talked to other people and experienced the way they see this experience of those sharing my writing, and then being brought to writing communities and being brought to these giant yoga centers where I'm being exposed to all sorts of people and all sorts of faiths and belief systems I've never encountered before, and engaging and talking with other people and sharing my story, and then having people share their story during these retreats, I've learned that God is this wonderful improviser, that God exists in the wildness, that God exists in the chaos, that God is is just pure creation. And so in that idea that I've met all these wonderful people and I've had these singular experiences, that's what got me to writing Fittings for Sardines and collecting all these poetries on self-love and self-acceptance, that I strongly believe that each and every one of us are a unique, singular event in the history of the universe and the cosmos. There'll never be another you with your background and your experiences and the things that have happened to you and the moments of joy and heartbreak. You're a unique song that has existed, that will never exist again, ever again. And same with me, and same with everybody else out there. And so we're all these wonderful pieces of music being played, individual songs that will never be played again in the history of everything. And it has taught me that God or creation or source or whatever anyone wants to call it, for me, it doesn't matter anymore. That each of us were loved so much that we were created as a unique piece of art. And we're all working concurrently together as a mosaic, and my piece is here and your piece is here, and here's another piece. And it has taught me, I think it's made me a better Catholic, that I'm able to look at my people sitting next to me in the pews as a wonderful piece of creation along with me. There is no hierarchy. I'm not a better person because I write poetry, and they're not a better person because they make six figures as a lawyer. And the priest isn't a better person than me because they went to preschool. And there's not all these hierarchical things. I feel much more connected to people who I sit next to in community, because I think each of us were so divinely created.
Mm.
And now, from that point, it definitely diverges me off from my Catholicism, where I don't believe that God operates in this strict rule book of, here's a book of how to follow God, and this is exactly because we know everything, and here's our fullness of truth. You must follow all these rules so you can know God too. I believe that God is still creating things, creating right now, the universe as we speak. Billions of galaxies are being formed every week, new galaxies that didn't exist. So I feel like God is still out there painting on the edge of the canvas and still creating new things. So God doesn't quite know where I'm going to end up, except for this. The only thing that's predestined in any of this is that I will be loved throughout the journey. And the journey will be hard, and the journey will be tricky, and there'll be moments of joy, and there'll be moments of absolute failure. There'll be moments of anxiety, and there'll be moments of faith. I won't have any control of that. And mercifully, hopefully, God is not pulling the strings and having any control of that either. God is just sitting next to me, co-piloting, saying, what a wonderful, beautiful adventure. Isn't this better than nothingness? And that is kind of where my spirituality is now, is I feel like I'm in this adventure. And it's not set, it's not written out, it's not predestined, but we're kind of in a runaway train together.
Beautiful. Yeah, and the fact or belief that we are each a piece of this divine mosaic just speaks to the importance of us being able to express our individual true selves. I mean, why else are we here, right?
Right. Because your story, and that's what I teach on these writing retreats, is it doesn't matter who you share your story with. Maybe it's going to be one person and you're just going to tell a part of your story when they're in their hospice bed and you're going to share a piece of their story with them. What a gift is that, to share our story with some people that we trust, because each of us can have this one little particle of mystery inside of us, that if we can, the more stories we listen to and the more we share with people, the more we can put these particles together and take a look at a broader view and say, oh my gosh, if we look at all these experiences together, there's a lot more we have in common. And maybe that's why my writing has gravitated towards people, is because I'm writing about things that are common. I mean, we live in 2024. Anxiety is easy to find. Depression's easy to find. Feelings of hopelessness and despair, they're everywhere. And I talk and write about those, and I don't try to do my best. And I believe in the Hey God, Hey John book. It's not prescriptive. It's not like if you do these 5 things, if you say 8 Hail Marys and do 3 dances at midnight, you're going to feel better. There's nothing prescriptive in there other than keep asking and keep seeking and keep looking. That's the only prescription there is. And that's kind of the journey I'm on.
What a wonderful demonstration of what we commonly talk about, which is conversations on spirituality and consciousness. And fair to say, as your spiritual journey has gone deeper and opened up more, clearly your consciousness has opened up wider every day, every moment, in relationship to yourself, to the natural world, and to us, to everybody. So
Yeah.
it's like an ongoing journey.
Yeah, I'll just say that it's led me to be really comfortable with saying I don't know, and letting the mystery be. I love that idea of not knowing how all of this works. I love the more I learn about God and the more I learn about other belief systems and the more I learn about just how magnificently huge this entire universe is, the less I know about anything. And that is so wonderful. Because I don't feel like I have to explain anything to anybody. I can just say, wow, let's ask some better questions.
Wonderful. There is one other topic I wonder. I did read your book on grief, and that is a topic that we really don't want to talk about very much, and something that, again, that you opened a door and a window on, and I wonder if you could just share a few words with us about what you have learned about grief. And what I recall from your book, sort of in general, is that there is no ending to love. So I really would like it if you would just share a few words.
So when I first started writing these Hey God, Hey John conversations back in 2016, 2017, I didn't like poetry. I got C minuses in high school and college in poetry units. It never really spoke to me. And these conversations started out these, God and John and me and God. And it was very like training wheels in which, however, I was accessing these words and talking about things, whether these were words that were planted deep in my heart over years of time and exposure to things that just got buried and then they're starting to grow out now, or whether I am, this is like an act of prayer and these are the answers I'm formulating in my heart as I start writing. My writing process is I just sit down and I write about how I'm feeling. Those conversations with God, I didn't know what I was going to talk about, except I knew how I felt. And that's why they're all very conversational. And they kind of go on because it takes me maybe a page to figure out, what am I actually talking about here? It's like probably a therapy session in transcript real time, but it was with myself. And so poetry came from that, where eventually the training wheels fell off. There was no having to be a God character. It was just the lyrics, because eventually in those conversations, I wrote like 1,300 of them over the course of 2 or 3 years. And only a chunk of them ended up in the book. Eventually, over time, God started responding to me, and I say God in quotations because I don't feel like I'm this holy prophet or I actually have a divine connection to a burning bush or anything. Who knows how any of this works? But this God character was talking to me almost in the lyrics. And and I refused to call it poetry because I had such a weird relationship with it. I didn't own an ascot or have a fancy hat. It's like, I'm not a poet. But it started coming out just as pure poetry. And so I just leaned into it with my improv background and comedy background. It's like, well, if something's happening, if something funny is happening on stage, you just keep saying yes to it and see where it goes. And so I just started saying yes to writing like that. And over time, I didn't realize I had written like 50 or 60 poems on grief. I didn't know I was having this experience with grief. I would write one maybe every few days, and I didn't think of this accumulating volume of grief poetry. And looking back, so I put them all together in this collection called Upon Departure. And yeah, the central idea is that the love we share with one another, it has no expiration date. When you love somebody and you give them a piece of your heart, I believe there's something nearly sacramental that takes place there, where we are now entangled forever. Even though maybe it gets frayed and maybe it gets broken, the love we give to someone doesn't get returned to us. And when someone passes away, that love continues. And for me, I approach the themes of those poems, of that poetry in that book, which I didn't know I was writing at the time. Same with my other book, Remedy, before that, which was all the poetry of kind of my journey through mental health and wellness, is I wanted to be in relationship with grief. And grief is like, we don't teach kids how to grieve. We teach kids all these other things to do in school and college. We teach them, you better know all the details of the War of 1812 or how the aqueducts worked in ancient Rome. But we don't teach kids what it's like to lose someone, or to prepare or give any infrastructure or any kind of ideas like, okay, these are things to think about later in life. It's the elephant in the room. We are all born here, and someday we will all pass on from here, and nobody talks about it. And so for me, watching my mom grieve for years after my dad died, I didn't know I was picking up on this lesson, that my mom grieved in such a hard way because she refused to ever acknowledge it as a real living thing in her house. She just walked around it and then would just suffer from it. Right. What I wish I could tell her now is that, like I did with my own depression or my own mental health and my own faith crisis, I went into relationship with those things, and I started writing to those things. Same with the poetry of grief. It's like, I want to be in relationship with it. I want to learn from grief, and I want to tell grief how I feel about it. And it became kind of this back and forth between me and grief. And grief teaches us so many things. It teaches us not to take a moment for granted. It teaches us to love the people we have in our life relentlessly and recklessly, to deepen our entanglement together. So someday when we're separated by this veil, a physical veil, we can still tug on this invisible rope between us because we loved so recklessly and we forgave each other while we were here. And again, it's like suffering we talked about earlier. Without grief, without the prospect of this is all such a temporary blink of an eye, this would be a very boring experience here on earth. We would just live on forever, and we would all just get sick of each other. Where with grief and death and loss, it puts a clock on the wall, and it makes the experience richer and deeper, knowing that it's not permanent, but love is.
John, I am so delighted that you have been able to spend time with us. So appreciate hearing your voice and listening to you again. I've really been touched by our conversation, and I think you're a marvelous, fabulous human being, and I feel privileged that we've gotten to meet you. So again, I thank you. And I know Linnell has a couple of little closing words here before we go on.
It was my honor.
So thank you.
I'm so honored to be here. Thank you guys so much. This is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, John, thank you. Thank you so much. Your poems really, really touched me. And I didn't get to everything. We're going to have bring you back at some point. The Anatomy of Peace poem, I just love the living in the now, just breathing, which goes to the grief and gratitude. I could go on, and I won't. I just thank you, and for sharing your heart with the world. It's really beautiful. But I wanted to give you a moment, if you'd like to let our listeners know where they can find out more about you, and if you have anything coming up, and then we would be very honored if you wanted to close us out with a poem.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I would love to. So yeah, if you want, and I'm the worst self-promoter of all time, so thank you for asking because I have never done the worst at this. That you can find me at the creatively titled johnroedel.com website. That will have information there. I'm all over Facebook. If you just search me up on Facebook, I post daily, if not every other day, well, or multiple times a day. I write in real time. And that's why there's plenty of typos and things. And this is part of the writing process that I teach people is write how you are right now. Don't think about it like, I'll write a week from now or 2 weeks from now talking about that experience. Write while you're as close to that experience as you can, because it's going to be more authentic. It's going to have some jagged edges. It's going to be rustic and it's not going to be polished, and that's okay. Write right then and there. Don't stop and just jump into it. And so that anatomy of the body poem that you talked about, I wrote, and I'll leave with that. I'll read that one. I wrote that one in the middle of a panic attack a couple of years ago in a coffee house. I didn't have a whole lot of time. We're a single car family. My wife works as a special ed teacher, and I needed to go pick her up in 30 minutes. And I knew I felt terrible. And what I do is I write when I feel wonderful things, terrible things, whatever it is, I write about how I'm feeling. It's the perfect, if you have writer's block, writers out there, this is the perfect way to write. Your emotions are a wonderful writing prompt at any moment. And so I just sat down and I couldn't quite figure out what I was so anxious about. The world was crazy, the news was awful, personal stuff, everything was kind of happening at once. And so I sat down and I wrote this poem, and it's probably the reason why it went very viral. And it's probably one of the reasons we're able to have this conversation today. So I'll close with this, but it's definitely part of my process and how I wrote all the Hey God, Hey John pieces, and then my poetry now. And so I'll close with this. My brain and my heart divorced a decade ago over who is to blame about how big of a mess I've become. Eventually, they couldn't be in the same room with each other, and now my head and heart share custody of me. I stay with my brain during the week. My heart gets me on weekends, but they never speak to each other. Instead, they just give me the same note to pass between themselves every week. And the notes they pass between each other, well, they always say the same thing. They say, "This is all your fault." On Sundays, my heart complains about how my head has let me down in the past. And on Wednesdays, my head lists all the times my heart has screwed things up for me in my future. They blame each other for the state of my life. And there's been a lot of yelling and crying. So lately, I've been spending a lot more time with my gut, who kind of serves as my unofficial therapist. Most nights I sneak out of the window in my rib cage and I slide down my spine and I plop myself down on my gut's plush leather couch that's always open for me. And I just sit until the sun comes up. Last evening, though, my gut asked me if I was having a hard time being caught between my head and my heart. I nodded. I said I didn't know if I could live with either of them anymore. I said, my heart's always sad about something that happened yesterday, while my head is always worried about something that might happen tomorrow, I lamented. My gut squeezed my hand, and I continued. I said, I just can't live with my mistakes of the past or all of my anxieties of the future. My gut smiled at me and said, in that case, I think you should go stay with your lungs for a while. I was confused, and the look on my face gave it away. But my gut said, if you're exhausted about your heart's obsession with the fixed past and your mind's focus on an uncertain future, then your lungs are the perfect place for you. There's no yesterday in your lungs. There's no tomorrow there either. There's only now. There's only inhale. There's only exhale. There's only this moment. There's only breath. And in that breath, you can rest for a while your head and heart work out their relationship. So this morning, while my brain was busy reading tea leaves and while my heart was looking at old photographs, I packed up a little bag and I walked to the door of my lungs. And before I could even knock on the door, she opened it, and with a gust of wind and with an embrace, my lungs said to me, she said, "Oh, darling, what took you so long?"
Wow. Thank you.
It's so wonderful, John. That's so wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.